My name is Bill Alford, and I'm the chair of the Harvard Law School Project on Disability. Our structure for this afternoon will be as follows. We'll first hear from Professor Michael Stein, who is the executive director of the program. Michael is sitting in the back, not because he, like many law students, wishes to sit in the back and pass on being called on by the professor, but because the lift to make the room wheelchair accessible went out of commission today. There's something symbolic about that and about how we need to work yet harder here at Harvard and in the world to be more genuinely inclusive. So we'll hear first from Michael, and then I'll say a few words, and then we'll turn to our two guests of honor. Michael, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you, Bill. It brings back memories of my student time, long, long ago. And forgive the back, because I'm told we need to record everything. Welcome, everyone. On the blackboard in front of you is the HPOD website, HPOD.org. We welcome you on behalf of the Harvard Law School Project on Disability. We hope that you will join us by email on our list and attend all events. We have a number of them throughout the year, including a seminar on disability and citizenship coming up on November 9th, along with the Radcliffe Institute. HPOD was founded in 2004 with Professor Alford and myself. In the almost 15 years since, we have worked in 42 countries on disability law and policy, and we also have worked locally, and we focus however we can on persons with intellectual disabilities, their families, and their communities. And so it's appropriate, even behind my back, this is a trick, to recognize many of our local partners who are here with us in the room. And these include the Massachusetts Advocates Standing Strong, the Institute for Community Inclusion, the Disability Law Center, the Center for Social Development and Education, the Perkins School for the Blind, Special Olympics Massachusetts, the ARC of Massachusetts, 3L Place of Somerville, the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and always our fabulous students. We encourage you to get involved, to work with us on our programming and our research and our advocacy. Please send us an email. We would love to do this together. If we had to put our work into one sentence or less, which is rather difficult, I would paraphrase my friend Robert Martin of New Zealand, now on the UN's Disability Treaty Monitoring Committee, the first person with an intellectual disability elected as an expert to any UN post. And that is that we are working to arrive at a place where it's no longer about us and them, but rather all about us. Every year since we began HPOD and began our open houses, I've been blessed and lucky to also share the following, and that is our programming is about working for people that we love, with people that we love, on projects that we love. And so we would be honored and delighted to work with you going forward. Today we have the pleasure and the honor of honoring 50 years of Special Olympics. Professor Alford asked me to introduce the individuals who will receive the award with one sentence or less, which is quite a challenge, but here we go. Ms. Melissa Joy Reilly is a Massachusetts SO board member and athlete twice from the Winter Games, an amazing person, and an aide to State Senator James Eldridge. Dr. Timothy Shriver is the visionary chair of Special Olympics, the author of Fully Alive, a lead advocate on the campaign against the R word, and someone who has, with great grace and humility, taken on the challenges and the responsibility of forwarding his parents' agenda on social justice. The award will be presented by Vice Dean William Alford, Chair of HPOD, SO Lead Director, Vice Dean of the Law School, and marvelous, marvelous person. Bill has dedicated over 20 years of his life to Special Olympics, all the while telling us that however much he works, he always receives more than he could possibly contribute. And that generosity of spirit, that humanity, that wonderful, wonderful kindness puts Bill Alford pretty much into one sentence. So Bill, the floor is yours and the presentation is yours as well.
Thank you, Michael. It's a joy to work with you. Thank you, Juliette Bowler, for amazing amounts of work to make this happen, notwithstanding the lift burning out. So, over the past 2 decades, the single greatest source of learning for me has been through my volunteer work with Special Olympics, which has just been an extraordinary joy and privilege. And so I'm absolutely delighted to represent HPOD and Harvard Law School today in bestowing our annual award for creative contributions to human betterment on Special Olympics on the occasion of our 50th anniversary at Special Olympics, and to welcome Melissa Joy Reilly and Tim Shriver to receive the award on behalf of the Special Olympics movement. Now, this award was initiated 6 years ago, and we've had some illustrious recipients: Justice Rosalie Abella of the Supreme Court of Canada, Justice L.B. Sachs of the Constitutional Court of South Africa, Dean Han Daoyuan of Renmin University in China, who has been by far the leading institution in advancing disability rights among Chinese educational institutions, Gary Sipperstein, professor at UMass Boston, who founded the Center for Social Development and Education, and Ambassador Luis Gallegos, one of the forefathers of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So you're joining important, illustrious company. Now, the prototype of Special Olympics really began more than 50 years ago in Tim Shriver's backyard with his mom, who understood the power and capacity of sports to do so much, to help build character, to help build one physically, to engage people in community, to build confidence, and foster teamwork and collaboration. So she turned their home into kind of a perpetual camp with hundreds of kids coming and going. Special Olympics itself formally began 5 decades ago, the summer of 1968 in Chicago. It's grown over the years to now encompass 172 countries, I think it is, 5 million athletes, another 1 million unified partners, 1 million volunteers, dedicated staff, and much more. Now, sport remains at the heart of Special Olympics, and every single day of the year there are hundreds of athletic events taking place around the world under the auspices of Special Olympics. Like everything Special Olympics does, all these are offered without charge to participants. But Special Olympics has grown and changed as the times have changed. And in addition to its sporting programs, it has wonderful health programs, because health disparity has been a major issue for persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities. It has great educational programs. For example, through the Unified Schools program, it brings together young people who, both with and without a disability, to play and learn and make each other better. It has also involved Special Olympics in addressing with governments and other bodies the concerns, raising the voices, bringing the voices of persons with intellectual disabilities into those halls so that policy and legislation can be better informed. It does wonders in building bridges, in being inclusive, and cutting across what otherwise would seem to be sharp dividing lines in our society and that of many around the world. Now, as I said at the beginning, I have learned more from Special Olympics over the last 2 decades than really any other source. What have I learned? I have learned from the volunteers, the athletes, the staff, singular lessons about determination, about hard work, about humility, about friendship, about camaraderie, about humor, about humility, about dedication, about beauty, about courage, and much, much, much more. I have been challenged, I have been teased, I have been loved in ways that I cherish. I often say, and Michael has heard me say this many times, I could not do my day job here at Harvard Law School, which, as those of you who know me know, is both day, night, and weekend job. I could not do that without my involvement with Special Olympics, which keeps me grounded and engaged. And so I just have profound gratitude personally to Special Olympics, to Melissa Joy Reilly, and to Tim, and I want to thank them. It's important for us to appreciate how much the athletes of Special Olympics bring to us and bring to the world in this incredibly fractious time in our lives. Athletes of Special Olympics teach us about inclusion and acceptance in friendship in ways that are profound. Plus, it's just a hell of a lot of fun. So for me, it's just been a privilege to be involved. So we at the Harvard Law School Project on Disability, myself, Juliet, Michael, Alonzo Emery, who's in the audience, Dr. Cui-Feng Ming, who is very involved in China, and other friends all want to thank the Special Olympics and convey our annual award to Melissa Joy Reilly and Tim Shriver. I think I will do that first, and then we will hear from each of them. So if I could, I will read the citation here. This is the Harvard Law School Award for Creative Contributions to Human Betterment. For 5 decades, the athletes of Special Olympics have taught the world about courage, determination, and inclusion. We celebrate their spirit and that of the staff, volunteers, families, and friends who comprise this remarkable movement, and look forward to continuing to learn with and from Special Olympics. So thank you.
Congratulations, Melissa.
Thank you. Keep it in.
Nice.
And we also have, for the headquarters, a small plaque that captures much of the same. And Melissa, maybe we can get in the photo here. Great. Thank you.
All right.
And so now we will turn to our 2 honored guests. And we gave Melissa the privilege of speaking when she wished. And so she would like Tim to go first. OK.
The last minute change. I love it. Thank you, Bill. I don't know if that's any better, but I guess it's recorded now. OK, good. Thank you. So as the saying goes, this is as close as I'll get to a Harvard Law School diploma. So I'm pretty excited. I want one picture just with me, and I'm just going to cover anything below where it says Harvard Law School and make it look like I finally got a degree. And I think there's some students here, and I've always wanted to sort of spring like a Marbury versus Madison question on you and see if I can make anybody nervous, because that's what you do when you have a Harvard Law degree. But this is obviously not for me. I am here really just as a placeholder, as a voice, as a member of the cheer team, as a student, as Bill has so articulately said, of a worldwide classroom on the best of humanity. This is not a worldwide classroom on disability rights. It's not a worldwide classroom even on disability, in my view. We, Bill, I, Professor Burns, who has joined us here from the School of Government, who's also a member of our International Board of Directors, we have the privilege of having a front row seat on the best of humanity, and it is an extraordinary privilege and joy, as Bill has already said. And you will hear from Melissa Joy, with joy, in a few moments. You will hear from someone who has traveled around the world to show off her skills. You will hear from a revolutionary. This is not about kindness and gentleness and sweetness completely. It's about being a rebel. It's about being willing to upset the status quo, to challenge it, to confront it, to name it, to not allow it to dominate you, to crush you, to overwhelm you. That's the presence you are being graced with in Melissa Joy Reilly and her mom and dad who are here. I'd like to thank them for their generations of hard work and commitment and toughness. Yeah. I also want to thank the entire team here, Professor Stein. I see Sergei Rybakov, who's come in from our colleagues in Russia, Mary Beth McMahon, who leads our team here in Massachusetts, and Sean Ferguson, who leads our work with governments around the world. We're a small but dynamic community of people who believe in a different future. I want to take you back, even though I don't have pictures, to imagine the Associate Dean of the Harvard Law School as a young lawyer in a law firm being invited by a senior partner to get on a plane and travel what in those days must have seemed like to another planet, to China, to plant the flag of disability rights in the 80s and the 70s and 80s and 90s. 2 lawyers one from here, one from a little bit down I-95, who were finding themselves in the midst of a global challenge to take an idea of sports for people with intellectual differences to countries around the world. And I think most people would be surprised if they were to say that this is the ideal picture of graduates of places like Harvard and Yale. These law schools graduate Supreme Court justices and judges, esteemed thought leaders, writers, political and social philosophers, great legal minds, great litigators. But here were two young lawyers, if I can say that, who were doing something that seemed very far from the law. Very far, one might say, from the law. Trying to engage a country, a series of countries in the end, in a form of soft power, as we now think of it, in a form of alternative power, represented by running a track meet or swimming in a pool. I like to think that in those moments, Bill, you and my dad and others, were practicing in some ways the highest calling of the lawyer. The search for justice, the practice and exercise of the legal imagination, and not just the legal mind, the capacity to see the difference between current reality and an imagined future, the capacity to engage hearts and minds, not just policymakers and definers and parameters and coercive systems, but to engage hearts and minds in anticipating what a legal or a justice imagination might produce. I don't know that you wrote any constitutions or laws in this country or in other countries in those years and in these many decades of pursuit of the truth, if I can put it that way, of the Special Olympics movement of Melissa Joy. But I would argue that you were engaged in the highest calling of a lawyer. And for that, all of us in Special Olympics thank you, and may you continue for many more decades to come in that pursuit. So if you thought to yourself that that is the calling of a lawyer, even for a moment, to imagine a different future, you might say, what is the future we imagine? What is the future we anticipate in this Harvard Project on Disability, with its intersection with the work of governments, with the work of medicine, with the work of educators? And I would argue we're beginning to see it even now in the emergence of no longer a binary worldview of people with and without disabilities, but a world of neurodiversity, a world of multiple intelligences, a world of constituent and community-based leaders who are fashioning their own futures from all kinds of different walks of life. Is this enabled by technology? Certainly, but is it created by technology? No, in my view. We're imagining a world where I would argue 50 or 100 years from now, people might look back on this gathering and say they were just in the early stages. They were just beginning. Michael's presence in the back of the room is just a reminder that we are only in the earliest of stages of the transformations of hearts and minds, not to a world where those who are different are allowed in, but to a world where everybody's gift is celebrated. Where the starting point of law, and I have no training, so forgive all the sloppy, probably imprecise language used by an educator, but where the starting point of law is something as simple as the idea that everybody starts out with a gift. No exceptions. I'm sure it's stated much more eloquently here and probably at much greater length in many books you'll read. But from us, for our point of view, it is this simple discovery, because if you can imagine, and this is a legal challenge, or a challenge for those of you who think about law, how is it possible that the same movement is occurring in 172 countries in a world when we know how much cultural imperialism there is, when we're sensitive to the great diversity of human meaning-making systems, where we're worried about imperial authority schemes that impose views one on the other? How is it possible that today in rural India, in rural China, in southern Africa, in Latin America, in Central Europe, in Western and Eastern Europe, all across Russia, volunteers, millions of them today, are joining in the exact same pursuit? Not because it was told to them by somebody in the United States or in Moscow or in a major capital, not because it came from the academy or from business, but because somehow, in their hearts and minds' work, they decided today to go out and line a track, or go out and stand by the pool preparing to teach, or go out and play on the playing field, whether they have a difference or not, in a unified game. How is it possible that even today, despite all of the challenges we face, we're discovering in this little, small speck of hope the idea that there's a human universal? Maybe we can't name it, but we can work to fulfill it. Bill and I worked several years ago on the concept that all the great human rights work, all the great social justice work done at the level of policy and law depended on the idea that communities would ultimately become communities of enforcement, that the real shift in the way in which a culture or a society navigates the great diversity of human experience comes when communities join together and demand the change that the law may have asked for. I think we titled our piece something about communities of enforcement. We believe that the Special Olympics movement is, in some sense, a community of enforcement focused on hearts and minds in pursuit of the universal truth that everybody has a gift. And it is our great honor and pleasure, Melissa Joy's and mine, to stand in this extraordinary place, receive this award alongside the precursors that Bill named, and to do so maybe in the end not with words but with images. So I would like to leave you with the challenge, no matter what your line of work is, whether you are permanently here at the law school or in the university in an academic or an administrative post, or whether you plan to set your wings and sail forth from here in the weeks and months and years ahead, I would invite you to hold a space for this idea that everybody has a gift, that when we see it in ourselves, we see it in others, and when we see it in others, we find the basis of a unity which can actually transcend all the problems which the world faces. It will not necessarily change the politics of today, but over time, I think we concede a new kind of politics, indeed a new kind of justice, where the forebearers of that justice will be the Melissa Joy Reillys of the world, who will stand before you momentarily and share her vision. I'd like to close with, again, not words, but images. Just a short 2-minute clip from the USA Games, the lower one there, from last summer. We don't have, this is a clip made by ESPN. You'll see no lawyers in it, I fear. But maybe you'll see some justice revealed. We have sound. I am not a... Sorry about that. That's okay. Show the world what it looks like to lead from the heart. Franny, do you have a message for all the athletes?
I love you. Cause here I come. I just want to make my family proud.
I'm so happy to compete with this group of guys that I love.
Walk, jump or run, I just prove tomorrow.
well.
No matter what your disability is, you can compete and you can train as hard as you have. You can win gold just like I did. I am brave, I am bruised, I am who I meant to be. Listen to me, here I
That's it. I think you're up.
Now we turn to Melissa. Thank you so much, Melissa.
Thank you, Professor Stein and Professor Alford, for inviting me. Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa. Honestly, I cannot believe that I am here for this very important event where the Harvard Law School Project on Disability will present Special Olympics, the HPOD Award for the betterment of all people. It is an incredible honor. It is so true. Special Olympics has made lives better. For all of us, especially for people like me and for our families. As you may have guessed already, I love Special Olympics, and I just love talking about Special Olympics. By the way, I'm a little nervous. But I hope everyone can understand me. Yes? Yes. Great. I'm going to do my best to speak slowly and clearly. And at the end of my presentation, I have a few slides. Special Olympics is an amazing organization. We are in more than 170 countries, and it is our mission to create a better world by fostering the acceptance and inclusion of all people. Through sports and programs like the Healthy Athletes, Special Olympics works for the well-being of the whole person with an intellectual disability. Also, the unified and inclusive sports programs in our schools makes the whole world a better place for all. Honestly, Special Olympics is a huge part of my life. I'm a Special Olympics athlete, a Special Olympics Global Messenger, and a Special Olympics board member. I love being an athlete. I love being part of a real team, making friends and having fun, just like a regular girl. I have competed in swimming, in cycling, and in alpine skiing. When I am not competing, I am busy working. I work here in Boston, in the State House. I am an office aide for Senator Jamie Eldridge, and I just love my job. I have been with Special Olympics forever. Skiing is my favorite sport. I also have been very lucky because I have been to 2 World Winter Games. One in Japan and one in South Korea. I raced against girls from Austria, Canada, Germany, and Russia. They were tough, but so was I. Thank you. Both in Nagano and in Pyeongchang, I won a silver medal in the slalom. This was the silver medal that I received from Tim Shriver when he was in Japan. I was really excited to be with athletes from all over the world. Honestly, Special Olympics has made my world bigger and better and so much more interesting. I have become a better and a healthier athlete, and I'm so much more confident in competing. I have learned how to be a team player in sports, but also how to be a team player at my place of work. I also have more understanding for people with other disabilities. And the best thing, I have made friends for life. Now I'll show you a few slides. Competing. Competing is so much fun. You make friends, and it teaches you to be your best. Yeah, thanks. Tim gave me my silver medal in Japan, and guess what? He just happened to watch me win my silver medal in South Korea. It was really an honor to be there to represent Team USA, and I love being there. This is Tim's mom, Mrs. Eunice Shriver. I just love her, and she'll always be my inspiration. Last May, the Boys and Girls Club of Dorchester gave me this amazing award. And guess what? In 2005, Mrs. Shriver also received this award. I was with her at the dinner and showed her my pictures from the World Games in Japan. She saw the picture of Tim giving me my medal and asked me to send her a copy. And I did. And then she sent me a nice letter for thanking me. This is my office in the State House. And this is my boss, Senator Eldridge. And I just love working for him. Actually, I'll be going there tomorrow, and all my coworkers are all really awesome. This is my niece. She is 1 year old, and I gave her one of my gold medals for her first birthday. Maybe someday she will be my unified partner, and we will compete together. This picture was made into a big billboard and was in many Boston train stations and on the Boston highways. And I did get a lot of comments. Thank you all for recognizing Special Olympics Massachusetts.
Bravo. Nicely done.
Well done, Melissa.
Thanks, Ben.
You are fantastic.
Thank you, Professor.
Malcolm, you overshadowed a little bit there.
Of course, as usual.
As usual. Did you have a second video? You're the other
We
ESPN?
can.
Yeah.
Would you like it? Okay.
Yes, do it.
So, should I introduce it briefly?
Yeah, and then if we have, after that, we have time for questions.
Yeah. Great. So there's a second video. This is,
Thank you.
so just a brief introduction. ESPN and ABC committed to, as part of our 50th anniversary celebration, the second biggest honor we've gotten after this Harvard honor is the honor of having a network commit to creating 50 stories that try to capture from around the world the narrative arc of this transformative power. I think what you'll notice in this, just by way of a quick introduction, not just ruin it, is what we're trying to do with these stories is tell the story of relationships transformed, not of a movement for people with intellectual disabilities, but also a movement from them. And the question these pieces are asking is, if we were learning, what would we learn? I'll let it go.
Football is an universal language. We all want to play, we want to win. It doesn't have barriers. I loved the games from childhood when I was back home playing tournaments around the village area. Every day that passed here, I feel at home. And I am safe today.
Leave their mark in every village they terrorize in Cameroon.
Nigeria's Boko Haram fighters have attacked villages here many times.
Cameroon's army killed at least 41 Islamist militants as it fought off a wave of attacks along its border in an escalation in the conflict.
In Cameroon, I did not have a stable life. I had to leave because it was becoming more dangerous. I left Cameroon with a set of boys. We passed into Niger. After Niger, we passed into Algeria. It was very difficult, but you cannot cry because if you have to cry up till when will you cry? You cannot go back because you don't even know how to start. It was like this for almost a year. And in Libya, I went at the seaside. So that is how in the cold evening I embarked. Waves will take you off, plastic boat, moms and children crying inside boats. After some days, then we saw rescue. In the told that we were saved and take us to Italy. I remember arriving in Sicily, and later on, after 3 days there, I was transferred to like a big center where we were to be put in some structures where we had a bed, we had a shower, and everything the first needs. Then after, I think about 6 to 7 months stay in the camp, I had to be presented to an educator, which is Reilly.
La prima volta che l'ho visto un ragazzo non spaventato, non ho visto tristezza, ho visto questo giovane ragazzo paesato, catapultato in un paese completamente diverso da dove proveniva. Allo stesso tempo è stata quella di un ragazzo con tanta voglia di affrontare una nuova vita, un nuovo percorso.
I love the Italian language, so I decided I would learn this language and I will start the procedure of asylum. And that is how I had to be registered in a local school. I also had Luigi that was showing me how to move in the city, go to library, a new place. And he introduced me to the special Olympics guys. I was watching at this guy with intellectual disability playing, with the determination, with the force. I was like shocked. I said, in my country, people like this. a healing inside house.
Ho voluto provare a inserirlo in questo mondo di calcificato perché ero sicuro che lui avrebbe potuto dar tanto ai nostri atleti e i nostri atleti avrebbero potuto in cambio dare tanto a lui.
They asked me some of them was why there were people discriminating that you are a migrant, you are a refugee, you have language barrier. These disabled guys instead accepted me. Because of them, I understood that I was a good person. These guys, we have to give them a chance. Because I was given a chance. My difficulties as a black guy in a foreign country, my difficulties as a migrant, I saw it in them in another form. They feel their difficulties because people think that they are not productive. But it's very wrong. I hope I will be able one day to make a message in the entire world and let them know that we are all equal. All we have to do is learn to know the other one, and we are all the same.
You see the power of Special Olympics from Melissa, from Tim, from the movie. It's just amazing. I think Tim and I are both getting a little weepy. Yeah. I think we have a few minutes for questions. If anybody in the audience would like to ask Tim, Melissa, myself, Professor Stein, or others.
Or my Beth.
Or your dad. Yeah,
My Beth.
Or Mary Beth.
Or Mary Beth, yes. The head of Special Olympics Massachusetts, which also is celebrating its 50th.
Woo!
All questions will go to Mary Beth. Okay. Yes, please.
Can you elaborate a little more on the political movements you're trying to influence around the world?
Well, let me make a comment and then turn to my fellow panelists. We're trying hard through Special Olympics and also our Harvard project to bring best practices to bear. There's no one uniform way that any individual country necessarily has to follow, but to make available a panoply of possibilities about how to develop legislation that ultimately serves this goal of being fully inclusive of the reasons that Melissa and Tim and the movie try to show. That we're all going to be better. Every last person is going to be better with full acceptance, full inclusion, full equality, that our gifts are all shared. So we try to be a resource, both Special Olympics and the Harvard Project.
Yeah, just to say, I think what's interesting, I find, is that more recently, a number of countries interested and coming to us and asking, for instance, we're working very closely now with the government of the UAE. We're not policy experts. That's what you'd find in a place like this in Special Olympics. But they nonetheless see in these experiences and these narratives and the capacity for their kids to grow up in a different way, an arc of change that they're trying to figure out, honestly. Because most of these countries, including to a large extent the United States and European countries, have still a residual, what I'd call in the fashion of the day, ableism. An elitism almost built into systems. When you hear the job Melissa is doing in her workplace, just recognize that that is completely countercultural. It may sound politically right, but it's completely countercultural. No CEO will come speak to you here and say that they're determined to make sure they can hire people with intellectual disabilities in order to advance their business. I would defy you to find such a person. So she is at the vanguard of a completely countercultural movement which recognizes that ableism is destructive, that the elitism that's represented by the Institute, and I'm saying this as a friend and as a wannabe for a place like this, but it represents a certain form of elitism that can insinuate itself into political systems in a very negative way. So I think what we're trying to do with this project here, as well as with our movement, is create, as Bill says, pathways to change. And we see this in in the PRC, we see it in the UAE, we hear that the Japanese government is interested in these things, the Korean government we've had quite a lot of discussions with. So we don't come bearing a new constitution or a new ADA type form. We come bearing the stories, the narratives, and the resources necessary to help people arc into this themselves. But I'll tell you today, the United Arab Emirates is rethinking a major disability rights plan that was centered on building a whole new generation of special schools. And they put the brakes on it as recently as the last few months to pause it. I don't know whether it will end up being changed completely, but to pause it to start to look at an inclusive education model and what it might do for their kids as they try to raise a generation that's open and tolerant and modern, if I can put it that way, in a country that has had challenges in that regard.
And all countries have had challenges.
Yeah, this is a universal challenge.
This is truly universal. And again, there's no single path, and part of the richness is being able to bring different examples. Professor Stein embodies that, for instance. Time for another question or two, if people have them. Yes, please.
Which countries are at the forefront of real positive change here? 3 to 5 countries that are really leading?
I think I will turn to Professor Stein, who has traveled to each of the 42 countries in which we've worked at the Harvard Project, to put him on the spot.
Thanks, Rob. You know, we don't have a central place where we put them on an index and compare them. So you have to go country by country and compare particular sectors. So if we wanted to look at overall idea of civil rights, US and UK are pretty good. If we wanted to think about inclusive education, Finland leads the world on all aspects of education and inclusive education. We wanted to think about moving from guardianship over to supported decision making. We might look at some of the things going on in Israel. We really have to go sector by sector and think about them all in terms of being culturally appropriate and responsive to many different views and also to resource constraints.
I would also say here, with respect to Special Olympics, we gather information. We probably have more information about persons with intellectual differences than any other organization. We try to put that in service of legislative and policy development so that it's grounded on real facts, on real data, and share, again, best practices. Things will be different in different countries given different historical backgrounds, different cultures, different economies, but clearly the goal that's uniform, no matter how much institutional design may vary, is to promote the dignity of persons with intellectual differences for the benefit of all of us, again, right? I really meant exactly what I said in my early remarks. I cannot tell you how much better my life is by virtue of what I have learned, gleaned, been just through involvement with Special Olympics.
The question is, does Yen Yen agree that you've gotten better? That's the I just want to say one other quick point on this, the classification. You know, people ask me this quite a lot, you know, what's the best? And in our movement, we have a sports model, which is what we call divisioning. So Melissa will run against women of her age and ability level to compete for her medal. There is not a normative definition. We don't keep records of the best person with William Simone between 30 and 35 in the freestyle or something like that. Our measure is doing better. Have you done better? In other words, have you done your best? And even though it's frustrating because people want to know what the North Star is and who's doing what, and you also want to kind of go to the people who are at the bottom of the ranking and then move up, we shun that kind of hierarchical normative classification system for all the reasons Bill has just said. And we go to countries not to sort of punish them if they're behind, but to just ask them to help work with us to put one foot in front of the other. The goal, in our view, is progress, getting better. And if you get better, you're doing what you got to do, whether you're the same as Finland or Japan, or whether you're like Korea or the Philippines, or whether you're like Germany or France, is less important than getting better from where you are. And even though that's not a perfect answer to how to look at the world, it helps people to see, at some level, a different pathway to the future without a lot of judgment and labeling obviously sometimes helpful, but sometimes not helpful.
And speaking of division, you can't resist one anecdote. So 5 years ago, the Harvard men's varsity ice hockey team and our coach, Ted Donato, is here. So we had a floor hockey match in the Hemingway Gym with the varsity men's ice hockey team and the Belmont, Massachusetts Special Olympics team and the Special Olympics International Board, and you couldn't tell who was having the most fun. Everybody was having a blast. The Harvard team, which was great, and has invited Special Olympics athletes several times to the rink to see games, come down to the locker room, initially thought, well, this is going to be a pretty easy game. And after the first half, when they were trailing the Special Olympics team, they understood these are serious athletes. So it was fun. We're close to the end. I want to give Melissa the chance to have the last word. Anything you'd like to say or do?
To say thank you for having me and Tim Shriver, and it's just an honor.
We are honored by your presence. Thank you. And thank you all for coming. And stay around informally now if you wish, but with classes to start at 1, this is the end of our formal session. Thank you very much. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Tim.